Hi everyone, this is Neil again. So we're now at the point where you're ready to start thinking about what you want to do as the first cycle for your action research. And let's just remind ourselves, what is action research? And here's this really nice quotation from G. McNiff and Jack Whitehead. Action research is about two things. Action, what you do, and research, how you learn about and explain what you do. The action aspect of action research is about improving practice. The research aspect is about creating knowledge about practice. The knowledge created is your knowledge of your practice. So when we're thinking about the first cycle, we're thinking about two things and they interweave. The first is the action side. What are you going to do? And specifically, what are you going to do to try and improve your practice? We remember that all our action research projects are called how do I improve how I dot 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 dot. So we're trying to improve something, okay? So the action side is about improving your practice. And the research side is about creating more knowledge about that situation and creating more knowledge about your own practice. So when we're designing our first action, and we're now in the red row. So don't forget, we've already done the green row at the top. We've identified the question, related it to our values and considered ethics. Last week we talked about ways in which we can really check out our starting situation and see what other people think about it, as well as what we think about it ourselves, because then we've got a good baseline to measure what's changed. And now we're into the second red box on the right hand side, deciding our first action and deciding how we'll figure out whether it's an improvement or not. So you've got both sides there. You've got the action side, deciding on our action, and we've got the research side. And the research side is, well, how are you going to find out more about this as you do it? And specifically, how are you going to find out whether it's really an improvement or not? Now, there's a nice little reminder here of the basic planning steps, again from McNiff and Whitehead. And you'll find this list on page 95, where they say, well, okay, how do you go about doing an action research project? Well, first of all, you review your current practice in the light of your values. We've done that. You identify an area you want to improve. You've done that. And now we're into the area of asking focused questions about how I can improve it and imagining a way forward. What happens beneath this is then what happens when you get into the first cycle, which are the blue boxes on the overall planning slide, trying it out, taking stock of what happens and going around again. So the first question we're going to ask ourselves is, okay, in terms of the thing you want to improve, what might you do about it? And this is where I think we need to really push ourselves to come up with different options, because I think it's really good to come up with at least 3 different ideas of things that you legitimately think you could do. And this will take some thought, and this is a bit of a push, but it's way better, and it's way better in the long run than just kind of coming up with the first thing and thinking, oh, that'll do, and then jumping into it, because you can end up wasting an awful lot of time doing that. But the other word I want to stress here is the word informed. Not only do you need 3 different feasible good ideas, but they need to be well informed ideas, right? And there are 3 ways in which your idea would be potentially informed. First is from something you've read, right? So because the whole point about this is we're trying to do things which aren't just things that pop into our minds. We've got to have really good reasons for why we think something's likely to work. So the first thing is there anything you've read, or are there any theories and ideas in the PG Cert course that you're aware of which make you think, right, that's something that I haven't thought about in my practice up to this point. If I incorporate that, that is likely to improve what I'm doing. So my decision making, my thoughts about what I might do are informed by some kind of reading or theory. The second way in which what you decide to do might be informed is you might have seen someone else do something and you think, that worked really, really well. Yeah, okay, I could use some of that. And again, that's something that's come from outside of yourself. The whole point about being informed is it's got to come from outside of yourself, because you can draw on someone else's practice. And the third way might be that actually you've had an observation either from a peer or from a PG Cert tutor or from college, and an observer, and again, that's somebody outside of your own practice. An observer's given you some really useful feedback, and you thought, oh yeah, okay, right, I can learn from that. So you're either going to be becoming informed from something you've read, something you've seen, or some feedback you've received. Now, at some point in the whole action research project, and remember there are 3 cycles, we are going to want to see all 3 of those things incorporated, right? You seeing evidence that you've read and you've drawn on your reading, seeing evidence that you've got ideas from observing other people, and seeing evidence that you've got ideas from being observed yourself. Quite often you'll combine more than one of those approaches in the same cycle of activity. Someone, say Sue or Jill, might come and observe you. They might suggest something for you to read. You think about what you got in the observation, you think about what they've told you to read, and that informs what you're going to do next. But we are going to want to see all of those, okay? So come up with 3 really good informed ideas here, which are drawing on something from outside of yourself, and just jot them down so that you can see them. They're on paper in front of you. And then having done that stage, which is now grayed out, you then think about, well, okay, which option are you going to try out first and why? Why do you think this is the best or most effective thing you could do? And then you're teed up. Now you want this by the beginning of next term, right? Then you are teed up to start doing your first cycle of activity at the beginning of next term. But you're not quite finished with your planning yet, because as you recall from last time when we looked at the research question, we looked at the top question, the grayed out one there, which is, okay, what do you need to find out before you start? The second question we need to ask ourselves is, okay, what data could you generate during your first action cycle which will provide evidence of what you're learning and whether your practice is improving or not? Because what you're trying to figure out all the way through is, A, how successful is this action that I've just taken? And B, what can I do next time to make it even better? So you also need to plan at the beginning, how are you going to go about generating some data or generating some evidence that's going to help you really see what the effect is of your first cycle of activity. Now, there's an awful lot of very fancy stuff out there about research methodology, and there are various suggestions in the reading list for this module. But I would say at this point, what you want to do is remember the 3 golden rules, right? So the first thing is that you are trying to be as objective as possible. And don't forget, we have said already, this is kind of quite challenging because you're the researcher, but you're also the person who's being researched. So being objective about yourself can be difficult. So the first golden rule, I would say, is really think carefully about the you position in the research triangle. Who are you gonna talk to and ask who would give you really good feedback about the effectiveness of your first little experiment? And by and large, you're probably going to be thinking here about talking to students, or getting data from students in other ways, like through questionnaires, whatever. And you're going to be talking about somebody coming in and observing you. So who do you think would be the best for that? And you need to think a little bit about your sample here, right? I mean, obviously, thinking about the students particularly, how are you going to get as many different and as many rounded opinions as possible from students? And the temptation, either consciously or unconsciously, is to talk to the quote-unquote good students, or the students who you think will say, yeah, that was great. Actually, that's no good. You want to talk to as wide a variety of students as possible. The really simple way of doing this is just literally in front of the group say, is everyone prepared to give me a bit of feedback if I ask for it? And they will say yes. And you say, right, I'm just going to pick 4 names totally at random out of a hat. This first time round, it's going to be the 4 of you. Is that okay? So you've got a really random sample of students. The other thing is, right, in terms of golden rules, you don't want to piss everyone off by taking hours and hours of their time. We're all busy. No one wants to be giving you hours of feedback. And also, you yourself don't want to end up with so much data that you become overwhelmed by it. So I always think golden rule number 2 is, whenever you're trying to get feedback on how something, how your action has gone, think about, what is the most important thing I most need to know? And I think, the fewer the number of questions you ask, often the better, as long as you ask really good questions. And I always find that, if I'm designing an interview schedule and I'm thinking about, okay, what questions am I going to ask in an interview, or if I'm designing a little short questionnaire to get feedback, I draft it. And then when I'm editing it, the question I ask myself is, do I really need to know that? Is that something that's kind of just like a little bit interesting, or is it actually really at the heart of what I need to know? And every question that you end up with has to be something that you really need to know, not just because it's kind of interesting, or you're feeling a bit nosy, or you fancy finding it out. No. You need to know, why am I asking this question, and what information am I going to get from it, and how is that a piece of information going to help me make my next cycle of activity even more effective? It's going to help me judge this one and help me make my next one even more effective. If possible, it's often worth doing a little pilot trial first, so just maybe talking to one person or a couple of people, or just asking 1 or 2 people to fill out a questionnaire before you ask everybody. Because if you learn from the pilot that there are questions that don't really work, or they're ambiguous, or people didn't really understand them, then you can change them and revise them before you send them out to everyone, and discover that it was a bit of a waste of time because nobody knew what question 4 meant and you haven't got anything particularly helpful from it. Okay, so your planning stage now. 3 different things that you could do, making sure that they're all informed by something from outside of yourself, your reading, your observation of other people, or other people's feedback to you, deciding which one is the one that you're actually going to do, and deciding how you're going to generate data while you're doing it, particularly through interacting with students and peers, so that you can get really useful information which will let you know how well did that particular cycle of activity work, and how can I build on it for my second one? Once you've got that plan in place, you are absolutely good to go.